For those of you that don't know me, my name's Caleb Stevens. Most of you probably know me. My wife, family, and I have attended church for about 13 years now, this church, and have come to call Plattsville home. Interesting enough, whoa, there we go, there it goes. Interestingly enough, once Steph found out that I was speaking, she took the weekend off, so it's just me and Gordon here. No, they're at mother-daughter's weekend at Camp Cherith, so I'm sure they're having a tiring but fun time. Whoa, don't cough in the microphone, that's for sure. Today I will share a story of a deep and dark struggle of the power of God's renewal. This story is real, and it is actually mine. I shared this before in 2016. So for those of you that have already heard this, feel free to, play on your phones or walk around out there, keep yourself busy, whatever you. There is a test at the end though, so, just be ready for that. I apologize in advance. It's not interactive. I don't have any slides or props to go with it, and it's really just me reading a story. It is, however, real, and I hope it'll be meaningful to some. As I share this today, I'll be speaking a lot of addiction. As many of you may or may not know, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I also want to apologize in advance if my story makes anyone feel uncomfortable. I realize many people in this room have likely struggled with some form of addiction, whether by themselves or through family or friends, and I understand there are many different situations. Some are likely coping with deep despair and dwindling hope as a result. This story is my walk with addiction and no one else. I was born in a little town in Manitoulin Island called Little Current. I was the second of 5 boys born into a family, with the last being twins. My father always joked with me that on the 4th try for a girl, and he got twin boys, he called it quits. I was born into a good, God-loving family. My father, Mark, was a cabinet maker, and my mother, Patricia, stayed home with us. During my childhood, we lived in the country where my father had his business. We all worked hard in his shop from a very young age, and he instilled solid work values, the value of hard work and responsibility in our lives. Growing up, my family faced many challenges. With 5 hungry boys and only 1 working parent, we often barely scraped by. My father's contracts were project-based and typically paid upon completion. And as such, we went through many times of feast and famine. As a sole provider, my father worked 6 days a week from morning to night, taking Sunday off to rest. A good Christian man. Sundays we attended Mindamoy Missionary Church, at which we were very involved in the youth program. Near the end of elementary school, I became very close friends with a girl named Stephanie. We started dating shortly after. Early in our relationship, it became apparent that Stephanie didn't know God as her personal savior. I was very concerned with this, and I spent some time praying about it. When the time was right, she asked me about my beliefs, and I was able to share them. And she started coming to youth, and soon after gave her heart to God. My life seemed perfect as I transitioned into high school. I had a girlfriend, both of us were Christians, my father's business was going well. I was very excited at the opportunity of life, until one weekend I was working with my father at a client's house installing a kitchen. It was a hot summer day and quite warm inside, and the customer didn't have AC. The customer wasn't home as well. At lunch, my father headed to the hardware store and suggested I take my lunch in the basement to stay cool. As I ate my lunch in the basement, I noticed a door in the front of the house. I was curious due to the location, as we didn't have a basement, and swung it open to take a look. Inside, it was completely full of bottles, after which I inspected them and realized it was alcohol. My family never had alcohol in the house, so I knew very little about it. I had, however, heard of many friends speak very highly of it. I checked my watch and realized my father would be back soon, so I quickly filled a few mason jars with gin. When I got home, I called a friend and told him what I'd done. He was so excited and asked me to wait till the weekend so we could try it together. Through the week, I would open it and smell it and obsess over what fun it could bring. When the weekend came, we quickly drank it in my friend's basement. I got so drunk, I blacked out and woke up extremely sick. After the sickness wore off, I thought to myself, that was awesome. I want to do that as often as I can. As the years went by, I became increasingly popular with the party crowd. I made a name for myself, and people knew I would not turn up an opportunity for a good time. I was a very happy drinker, and people liked to party with me. I would freestyle songs, come up with crazy ideas, and ramp up the excitement. As my lifestyle changed, I became increasingly distant from my youth group. I still believed in God, but I also liked having fun. I wanted both God and drink, and I was sure that I could keep them separate and give them both the attention they deserved. After high school, Steph and I moved south for post-secondary education. I took a very difficult electronics course and decided early on if I was going to pass, I was going to have to quit partying so often. So I buckled down, sobered up, and focused on my studies. Steph and I also found that during that year, our relationship bloomed, and we became increasingly sure we were meant to be together. After the first year, I was feeling comfortable with my course and moved in with some friends. My partying started again, with increasing frequency. For the most part, I was able to keep my lifestyle and work separate. I was also able to shelter Steph from the worst of it due to our long-distance relationship, as she was in Guelph and I was in Kitchener. I was becoming extremely good at deception and starting to live a double life at this point. In the fall of my last year of school, I proposed to Steph. We were so excited we rushed back to her house to call our family. I had never heard my father so happy. He always had some kind of wisecrack, apparently like myself, I'm told. But for the first time, he was genuinely speechless. Now, engaged, I felt my life was complete. I was partying a lot, but, well, I was in college. That's what you do, right? I'll get this under control later. It's manageable now. Near the end of December, my family and friends were to have a vacation down south and were to pick me up and bring me for a holiday. On December 16, 2004, with exams nearing the end, we threw a party at our house to celebrate. Late that evening, I thought it strange I hadn't heard from my parents. I went upstairs to call my mom. She abruptly picked up and frantically said, "I can't talk right now. Your father's been in a car accident. I've been calling him for an hour and he's not answering." My heart sunk. I could barely speak. I went downstairs and told my friends. They reassured me things would be fine. That provided little consolation. I spent the next 4 hours sitting there drinking, unable to speak, waiting for the phone to ring. When it finally rang, my younger brother was on the other end. As I walked up the stairs to the kitchen, it was as if the stairwell was closing in on me. He could barely speak and struggled to say, "Mom wanted me to call you. The police are here. Dad's dead. He's not coming back." I hung up in that moment. I felt as if my life had ended. I was inconsolable, and nothing seemed real. I went to bed and screamed myself to sleep. The next day, I got a ride home with my uncle. We arrived, and a friend was waiting at my house for me. I stopped in to see my mom, who was in such shock she could barely speak. And that night, I turned it off, and I drank again to end the pain. I spent Christmas holidays settling as a state, doing everything I could for my mom, and most of all, staying numb. I remember at his funeral, heading to the washroom and looking in the mirror and thinking, I don't feel anything anymore. How come I can't feel? At the time, as time went on, the immediate intense pain of my father's passing subsided. I went back to finish my course and became an electronics technician. I got my own apartment for a year while Steph finished her degree, and we spent weekends together. In all of this, one thing remained. I drank behind the scenes as often as I could. At this point, this meant drinking alone, as many of my college friends had moved away. The next spring, Steph and I finished school, and that summer, she and I were married. It was one of the happiest days of my life, spent with good friends from near and far. We settled down first in a basement apartment in Guelph, and soon after saved enough money to move to a semi-detached house in Waterloo. We felt we had it all, good careers, each other, our future, but one thing remained, my drinking. We would discuss ideas of how I would manage it better. And once she stated, "You never used to drink like this before we got married." And I replied, "Well, it was just easier to hide when we weren't living together." A few years later, we moved from Waterloo to Plattsville. Growing up in Manitoulin, we wanted to start our family in a small town. We started attending this church and instantly felt welcome. We also started planning for a family. Within the church, we met some great friends, and I became very close with a few and actually confided in them regarding my problem with alcohol. They were very supportive, but every time they tried to dig deeper, I would distance myself. I did this because I didn't believe I needed help. I felt I could deal with this on my own. I also didn't want the general public to know my problems. And really, did I want to quit? It took a few years to get pregnant, and when we finally did, it seemed as if God had blessed us beyond measure. We found out we were having twin boys, and we're so excited. Fortunately, this turned out to be into pain. As while I was away on Manitoulin hunting and partying, Steph went into preterm labor, and our babies were delivered at 22 weeks. I arrived at the hospital after delivery. One of our little ones survived for a few hours. As I sat there holding him, I could not believe God would allow this. I was so filled with sorrow and anger, I could barely contain it. As a side note, I do want to thank Plattsville Church because I made a phone call on my way down south, and there were 6 people at the hospital within half an hour, and one of them helped deliver that child. So, in the aftermath, I began to drink that much harder. I would drink Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and often once or twice throughout the week. I turned off the pain and disappointment as often as I could. As the next few years passed, I became very sick, mentally and physically. My substance addiction became very apparent, and I tried to quit many times to no avail. I would say, this time I'll do better. Next time, I'll only have this or that amount to drink, only to find myself worse off than before. I read self-help books, talked to other Christians, begged and prayed for sobriety, yet none would come. My prayer would go like this: God, help me to go this week sober and only drink on the weekend like normal people do. Give me strength to control this, yet no reprieve would come. Regardless of the situation, we still wanted a family. So a year later, Steph became pregnant with Gordon. I thoroughly believed that once he was born, everything would change. People would tell me, you won't have any time to drink once you get children. And I staked everything on that. I thought for sure there is no way I could continue on like this with a child to care for. Well, Gordon was born, and I still drank. I loved him dearly and felt terrible about it, so I worked even harder to make drinking a part of my life that no one's seen. I would wait until everyone was in bed and drink myself to sleep in the basement. During this time, I distanced myself further from everyone who wanted to help me. I would use the new baby excuse, when in reality, I felt like I had to hide who I was. As summer approached, a member of our congregation was pushing me to go to Fishers of Men. I reluctantly agreed, as I love fishing. I went to Fisher Men for one reason: to fish. I remember wishing I was alone when I arrived. I don't want to talk to all these people and listen to Bible stories, I thought. I was so full of hate and fear, I even brought alcohol with me, as at this point, I couldn't physically spend 3 days without a drink, especially in an uncomfortable situation. Then the impossible happened. As Ted Nellis led us in our meetings, a retired bank robber and alcoholic, Ted had been sober for years and had dedicated his life to reaching others for God. As he shared, I thought, he sounds worse than me, and yet he's sober and happy? And I realized that my heart had been hard, and that I had buried so much pain and grief down with alcohol that I couldn't feel anything but fear and anger any longer. At the end of the convention, I met with him and prayed. I went away feeling renewed and sure that I could win this battle. I went away with a little hope for the future. When I got home, I explained everything to Steph. We went on vacation in Michigan, excuse me, and I drank moderately. We had a great time, and I felt I was on the mend, and all was going to change from here. Upon returning to work, I slowly fell back into my old habits. After a month or so, I was worse than ever. Looking at Steph for the first time in my life, I could see she had lost hope in me and our future. Steph had been the only person who believed in me when no one else, including myself, could. I gave up and distanced myself from her. I still did all the things a father was to do with his child and worked hard to hide my feelings and lifestyle from Gordon. But to Steph, I only spoke when necessary. Months went by, and I got much worse. I was riddled with such fear and anxiety, and I felt any day something horrible would happen. My health quickly declined, and I was often in to see the doctor. During these visits, I would never tell the truth about what was causing these ailments. Even through all of this, I drank even harder. Drinking was my way to cope, and when things were bad, I drank hard. When they were worse, I drank harder. I could see there was no way out and no future for my child that I loved more than anything. This caused extreme anxiety, for which only I had one cure. I was in the deepest and darkest place of my life, and I knew I'd caused it, and yet I had no way out. One day in early November, a member of our congregation asked me to go to Promise Keepers, a conference in Toronto called Fearless. I didn't want to go, as I was worried people would figure out who and what I really was. Over the next few weeks, I found this constantly on my mind. Everywhere I went, people were asking me if I was going. It consumed my mind day and night, and I felt led to go. Finally, I gave in and signed up. As we headed to Toronto, I was thinking, just get through these 2 days and you'll be back home and able to drink. Keep your mouth shut and put on a smile. I walked into the conference with a nearly 20-year obsession with alcohol, full of fear, anger, pain, despair, and hopelessness. The first speaker took the stage, and I was hanging on his every word. It felt as if God was literally taking me apart, cell at a time, and rebuilding me. I looked around, wondering if somehow one of my friends had staged an intervention. No one was paying attention to me, and I thought to myself, if they're staged an intervention, they spent a lot of money to do this. My heart melted. My armor was gone, and I didn't care. At the end of the evening, I didn't even want to leave my chair. I was in the presence of my Creator. That night, I shared my situation with some people, and a person I had just met said, I go to Alcoholics Anonymous every week. Why don't you join me? I instantly recoiled and said, no way. It's not that bad yet. I'm not ready for that. As I lied awake in bed that night, I just kept replaying this in my head. I'm not ready for that. It's not that bad yet. Really? What is that bad? The next day, the conference was equally intense. God was speaking to me like never before. I remember literally hearing his voice and him saying over and over, come, take my hand, and I'll walk with you through this. And it all became so clear. I had been crying out to God to allow me to control my drinking and circumstances. He had not forsaken me and could see I needed special help in order to be free of this bondage. But he was saying all along, leave this life and come to me. I want full control in your life. As it states in James 4, verse 7 and 8, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. I realized I had been unwilling to submit full control of my life to God. I wanted to control my life and planned only to use God when I deemed it necessary. I couldn't draw near to him because I had placed more value on alcohol and it stood directly between us. With that, I walked over to the person I had met earlier that day and said, I'll go with you to Alcoholics Anonymous. An unbelievable burden instantly lifted, and that day, for the first time, I was sure life could be different. I went home a child of God that night, with my soul in God's hands. I realized what I'd missed at Fishers of Men. Submit full control to God and act. I needed to give it to God and draw near to him, listen for his will and act on it. Today, I stand before you a free man, free from the bondage and the obsession of alcohol as a solution to my problems. During the 20 years of drinking, very few days went by where I didn't obsess over the next drink. One day at a time, with God's guidance and the help of the AA Fellowship and the action I took, I have not had to have a drink since November in 2014, almost 9 years ago. During the past 9 years, I have realized that alcohol was not actually the problem, but a horrible solution to the many problems I face in my life. Today, I have the tools to deal with those problems properly. Through my recovery, I have learned to once again love myself, and I am sure of my worth in God's eyes. My marriage that I once believed was on the verge of collapse has been renewed. We work daily on our relationship to grow as parents, and most of all, become best friends once again. My wife, Stephanie, also found a great deal of help and guidance in Al-Anon. Her program allowed her to better understand alcoholism, the effects on the family member, and how to grow and move forward in spite of it. I have 3 wonderful children, Gordon, Annalyn, and Catherine, who are away, and I thank God every day that I can now be the father that God intended me to be. I share my testimony with you because I sat in that seat for 5 years, dead inside, and few had any idea. Alcohol is a disease of the feelings. It's cunning and baffling. Too many suffer in silence. If I sat here and everyone thought I had it all together, then how many other people are sitting here in similar situations or know someone who is? My message today is that alcohol, drugs, food, pornography, anything that we place before God are wrong solutions that many of us are using today to cope with the pain, hurt, and disappointment in our lives. I challenge you, submit yourselves to God. Draw near to him. He will draw near to you. Sometimes God asks us to seek outside help. We often hear of instant transformations, which I absolutely believe are true. But I think many more are slow, steady, and day at a time. There is help for the vast majority of these addictions, and if you really want a different way of life, it is possible. I am proof that there is hope. God can walk with you through addictions and deliver you to the light. But you have to repent, relent, and let him take control. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here today, and I'd be more than happy to speak with anyone individually if they have any questions.